America has given more foreign aid to one country than any other in modern history. It has defended it diplomatically, armed it through wars, and stood beside it through decades of global controversy. To some, it is a vital alliance. To others, it is one of the most questioned relationships in modern geopolitics. But how did it begin? Why did the most powerful nation on earth tie itself so closely to a small state born in 1948? The answer is not simple. And it did not happen overnight. This is part 1, from the birth of Israel to the end of the Cold War. If you want to understand how history shapes the world we live in today, make sure to subscribe to Historical Truth, like this video, and stay with me as we break this down step by step. It is May 14, 1948. The British mandate over Palestine comes to an end. In Tel Aviv, a declaration is read. The State of Israel is born. Within minutes, the United States moves. President Harry S. Truman officially recognizes the new state, making America the first country to do so. But inside Washington, this decision was far from unanimous. Senior officials, including George C. Marshall, strongly opposed recognition. They warned it could damage relations with Arab nations, threaten access to oil, and open the region to Soviet influence. Truman chose to proceed anyway. His decision was shaped by multiple forces. There was personal conviction. He had long believed in the historical connection of the Jewish people to the land. There was the moral weight of the Holocaust, and the urgency of finding a refuge for survivors. And there was political reality. 1948 was an election year, and domestic support mattered. But at that same moment, another reality was unfolding. The land on which Israel was established was already home to a large Arab population, Muslim and Christian communities that had lived there for generations. They had not agreed to the division of the land. And when the new state was declared, conflict began almost immediately. Neighboring Arab nations entered the war. What followed was a violent and transformative struggle. When the fighting ended, Israel controlled more territory than originally proposed. And hundreds of thousands of Palestinians had fled or been displaced from their homes. This event would later be known as the Nakba, the catastrophe. It became one of the defining memories shaping the conflict that continues today. If you're following so far, this is where everything begins to connect, so take a moment to like the video and let me know in the comments, was this outcome inevitable, or could history have gone differently? In the years that followed, the relationship between the United States and Israel was not yet what it would become. During the 1950s, American policy in the Middle East was driven primarily by one concern, the Cold War. The United States was focused on containing Soviet influence, particularly in oil-rich regions. Israel, at the time, was not yet seen as a central strategic partner. This became clear in 1956. Israel, alongside Britain and France, launched a coordinated attack on Egypt after the nationalization of the Suez Canal. President Dwight D. Eisenhower was not informed in advance. And he reacted strongly. He pressured all three nations to withdraw, even threatening economic consequences. This was not the behavior of an unconditional ally. At this stage, the United States was trying to balance relationships across the region, particularly with Arab states. But that balance would not last. In 1967, tensions in the Middle East escalated rapidly. Egypt moved troops into the Sinai Peninsula, closed key shipping routes, and formed alliances with neighboring countries. Israel, feeling increasingly threatened, launched a preemptive strike. In just 6 days, Israeli forces defeated multiple Arab armies and captured significant territories, including the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. The outcome shocked the world. For the United States, the implications were clear. Israel had demonstrated a level of military capability unmatched in the region, defeating forces supported by the Soviet Union. From that moment, the strategic calculation began to shift. Israel was no longer seen as a liability. It was increasingly viewed as a potential asset. At this point, the relationship begins to change. And if you want more deep, fact-based breakdowns like this, subscribe to Historical Truth and stay with the story. That perception was tested again in 1973. Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack during a major religious holiday. Israeli forces were initially overwhelmed. For a moment, the survival of the state itself appeared uncertain. The United States responded with urgency. Under President Richard Nixon, a massive airlift of military supplies was sent to Israel. The scale was unprecedented. The tide of the war eventually turned. But the consequences extended far beyond the battlefield. Arab oil-producing nations responded with an embargo. Energy prices surged. Economic shock spread across the United States and beyond. For the first time, Americans felt directly how Middle East conflicts could impact daily life. Out of this crisis came a new strategy. Rather than simply reacting to wars, the United States began actively pursuing regional stability. Diplomatic efforts intensified. This culminated in the late 1970s, when Egypt and Israel, longtime adversaries, entered negotiations. With the mediation of President Jimmy Carter, a historic agreement was reached. Egypt formally recognized Israel. Israel withdrew from the Sinai Peninsula. It was the first peace treaty between Israel and an Arab nation. For the United States, it was a major strategic achievement. But not all aspects of the agreement were fulfilled. Plans for resolving the Palestinian question remained incomplete. And tensions persisted. By the 1980s, the relationship between the United States and Israel had evolved further. Under President Ronald Reagan, cooperation deepened significantly. Military coordination expanded. Intelligence sharing increased. Formal agreements strengthened the partnership. Israel was now firmly established as a key ally. Even during moments of disagreement, such as the conflict in Lebanon, the overall relationship continued to grow. By the end of the Cold War, the foundation had been set. What began as a complex and debated decision in 1948 had transformed into a long-term strategic alliance. But this transformation came with consequences. For decades, conflicts in the region had reshaped borders, displaced populations, and influenced global politics. And the effects extended far beyond the Middle East. Oil markets, global security, and international diplomacy were all impacted. So by the end of the Cold War, the question had changed. It was no longer simply, why does the United States support Israel? It had become something deeper. How did this relationship become so central to global strategy? And what would it mean for the future? If this helped you understand the bigger picture, like the video, share it, and subscribe to Historical Truth for Part 2, where we break down the modern era and what this alliance means today.